Hi everybody. We're all human and we can all make some mistakes. So if we're going to slip an airplane or skid an airplane, let's talk about how it'll behave when we screw some things up, specifically if we stall. Our ball and our butt slide in towards the relative wind usually, and that's why we teach people to step on the ball when we're teaching people to fly. If we keep the relative wind fixed in our picture and yaw the plane into various slips, we see the same forces and indications as they relate to the relative wind. When you hear pilots talk about slipping versus skidding turns, we're referring to whether the relative wind is hitting the airplane from the outside or the inside of a turn. So in this example, we'll pretend that we simply need more right rudder all day long, and this isn't that uncommon to encounter during primary training. With the relative wind coming from the right side of the airplane, the inclinometer and the pilots are sliding off to the right. If the plane flies a left-hand turn, the wind is from the outside of the turn, so this is a skidding turn. If we turn the airplane back to the right, the wind is still hitting the airplane from the right side, and now it's coming from the inside of the turn, and we are in a slipping turn. Aerodynamically, the airplane does not know the difference between a slip and a skid. However, from a risk management perspective, there are some significant differences. A lot of us do forward slips straight ahead just like this. Sometimes we can mix turns and slips together to do these turning forward slips, just like this. So let's try to duplicate likely error scenarios. Let's take the cub up and see what happens if we get too slow or try to pull off a slipping accelerated stall in a turn. So here we are at altitude. We've already slowed the airplane and gently brought the power back to idle. What we're going to do is we're going to enter a slip and hold our attitude until we are out of elevator travel. Let's watch what happens. You'll notice the nose bobs around gently and the airplane settles into a new state. If I try to induce a gentle oscillation with the elevator, the airplane settles back into this state. I'll loop this footage while we talk about why this is happening. Side slip changes some of the properties of the wing, but it also makes the elevators much less effective. What that means is we can get the plane to stall and spin from a slip, but we really have to work at it. So let's try the same thing in a turn to see if we can get an accelerated stall out of a slipping turn. Here we are again, slowed down and at idle power. We will roll into a gentle turn, go into a full slip, and let's see what happens. Just like before, the airplane's nose settles into a particular attitude, and just like before, our elevators are less effective. Airspeed indications are unreliable in a slip, but you'll note that we're averaging a little more airspeed indicated now. I'll increase bank briefly by lowering the angle of attack to make the ailerons more effective and introduce a pitch oscillation. The plane settles back into a stable slip, albeit at a steeper bank angle and higher, though inaccurate, indicated airspeed. Just like before, it is possible to stall and spin from a slipping turn, but you have to work at it. The high wing is the wing that stalls first, so even if we do manage to get into trouble, the airplane rolls through level, giving us plenty of time to recover and reconsider things. So slips are neither difficult nor dangerous. They aren't without risk, however. With turning slips, you can get some extreme rates of descent that can be hard to arrest if you carry the maneuver too far. But even this is manageable. When it comes to skidding turns, now is a good time to introduce the skidding turn to final scenario. I'm going to use some Cessna 140 video from Fly 8 Mike Alpha to set up this scenario. It's worth mentioning that I'm using only part of Fly 8 Mike Alpha's video for the purposes of setting up this scenario, and I encourage you to view John's material on his channel. He has a particularly good video about a Cirrus accident at Houston Hobby Airport. Typically, when we describe a setup for a skidding turn to final, we describe an airplane that is overshooting final. As this happens, the pilot accidentally starts skidding the airplane to line up on the runway center line. Another scenario to consider is a pilot discovers they are high as they are turning final and decides to slip to land. They aren't comfortable ruddering away from the runway and increasing the bank angle, however. So instead they rudder towards the runway, have decreasing bank angle, and they get a false sense of safety in the maneuver. We'll pretend that we decide to abandon the landing in a hurry at low altitude, and we'll add power aggressively. We start our turn and feet in rudder like we're overshooting final or skidding instead of slipping to lose altitude. The stick is all the way back. Just like a slip, the plane settles into its new state. The ball is to the outside of the turn, and it's the low wing that's going to stall first. There's less bank, so things seem pretty benign. Now, let's add power like we're trying to go around and see what happens. When we add power, left turning tendencies increase and elevators become more effective. The result is a spin from our skidding turn. From low altitude, this can be unrecoverable if it catches the pilot off guard. This is why two aerodynamically similar conditions, the slip and the skid, can be drastically different in terms of risk to the flight. Slips are pretty safe and tolerant of errors. Skids, especially at low altitude, are anything but. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video.